First and foremost, improving the business climate. There are many cases hanging in the court system. GSP Plus requires human rights, labor rights, environment, combat of corruption.
I'd like to ask you about your opinion about how Bangladesh can secure more Danish investments, because Bangladesh needs a lot of foreign investments.
Absolutely.
And which areas also?
Yeah, I'm told that Bangladesh is the lowest foreign direct investments in South Asia. So there's work to do there. I think first and foremost, improving the business climate.
Right.
The government has done a lot over the past years. They have also digitalized a lot of services which can help transparency, accountability. But there's also way to go to level the playing field between international and local companies, and generally improve the business environment. For instance, one of the elements of a good business environment is contract enforcement. That if you sign a contract, you can also rely on it to be implemented and respected. And that is a weak point in Bangladesh. And you cannot expect either that justice is done if the partner is not living up to expectations. You go to court, but that takes many years, and you cannot expect.
Are you referring to an old case of computer sales, something like, it's like 15 years ago?
No, there are many cases hanging in the court system. So that's but one example of what needs to be done. Danish companies like predictability.
Okay.
They like, knowing the rules of the game. They're very compliant, but they need to know the rules of the game. And we have more than 50 Danish companies engaging somehow or another with Bangladesh, which is also a huge number for a small country. But those are the experienced and robust countries who can handle this kind of situation. We could have many more if the business environment was more conducive to it.
And which areas would they be interested in Bangladesh?
I think food and agri is one.
Food and agriculture.
Yeah, we still have companies, government also, RMG, coming, looking to move their production from China to Bangladesh, which we also like.
That is something new.
That's also something new. One of the companies is producing water pumps that could maybe also be done here. There are many in almost all sectors, I would say.
Talk about this LDC graduation. You see that when this starts for Bangladesh, we'll definitely for the first few years we'll need a special kind of agreement or something that our businessmen say, or else we'll suddenly lose market. So, is there any bilateral discussion for with Denmark and Bangladesh, between Denmark and Bangladesh, to have some kind of agreement for during some phase of the LDC graduation for RMG and other things?
Now, as you know, Denmark is a member of the EU. So therefore we are part of EU instruments.
Right.
Both when it comes to everything but arms, EBA to Bangladesh, to its accession to GSP Plus when that time comes. And we're not in a position that we can negotiate bilateral agreements, trade agreements. But certainly there's the perspective of GSP Plus.
Yes.
Bangladesh will need to work on getting that and the partnership agreement, maybe, with the EU, including Denmark. But the GSP Plus requires, among other things, that the country will comply with a number of UN conventions on human rights, labor rights, environment, combat of corruption, etc. So that will be very important work for the government going forward to making sure that they complies with these resolutions, which the government have all acceded. I mean, it's not the EU coming up with, it's international UN conventions that the government has ratified and that are behind the accession to the GSP Plus.
Have you any concerns about rights issues in Bangladesh? For instance, trade union rights. There are some certain things we often see that Western countries talk about. So you think we are in the right direction with trade union and all that?
Well, Denmark is part also of an EU more informal initiative. We call it EU, Team Europe initiative. Here, among all the EU countries working within the decent work agenda. So we are actually very active there. You know, trade unions have been a very positive factor in the Danish society throughout the history, and so essential in building that what we call the Nordic model, where few have too much and less have too little, if you understand what I mean. Very equal societies. So we really believe that this is a healthy input to a stable, predictable labor market, which can also allow, it's a win-win for the companies and for the laborers to have a stable labor market. And that we have, so successfully had in our countries. Would very much like to share with Bangladesh our experience, of course, knowing that you cannot just transfer, but as inspiration for Bangladesh also. Now, what we're doing in Team Europe is to support the government's own action plan to improve the decent work agenda in Bangladesh. So it's not for us to impose. We are supporting what the government proposes and supporting that, giving financial but also moral support for that, and having a dialogue about how that agenda can be advanced also in Bangladesh.
Another thing that I'd like to ask you about is that a very common thing is for very developed countries, very many developed countries, is that they also take manpower, especially in some certain sectors. So does Denmark have this kind of opportunities for manpower from Bangladesh?
Right now, very few, I would say. But like many European countries, we are an aging country.
Yes.
So we'll see what the future brings. And within the EU, we are also working on this kind of partnership with Bangladesh among all EU countries too. But a lot of, I can tell you, a lot of Bangladeshi students are going to Denmark.
So is there a special thing for, for students in Denmark? Is there the study opportunities are very good or something?
I believe so. I haven't talked to them, but we can see every year we get more and more applications for student residence. So we should hear what is bringing them to look to Denmark among all the countries of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Bangladeshi students are actually going to different, obviously looking for the best opportunities, obviously. Many European countries, Germany, Denmark, Finland.
And you know, students who are completing their studies in Denmark, if they get a job after that, they are allowed to stay.
Okay, yeah.
So that's also maybe one way of immigration that is not very visible, that we cannot really make statistics about, but
I get it.
Could be important.